Good morning, everyone. I am just getting things started. Bear with me as I kind of fuss around for just a second. I will be getting started here in just a minute. I hope everyone is having a great Saturday morning. I know mine is going pretty well, so I hope yours is too. I am getting all my stuff set up here. I have so many ideas to share with you today that I hope you are excited. Let's see, I'm just trying to get this a little more in focus. There we go. I think that should do it. So today I am going to tangle with Rixty, which is a pattern that I love. It is one I use a lot. Probably not quite as much as I use flux, but it's definitely up there in terms of things that I play with. So let's see here. I posted a couple of variations to get started, and I want to show you those first. So this is the way that I draw Rixty most of the time. It is my primary, it is my go-to, it's just the way that I generally draw it in most of my personal tangling. I think of it kind of as a wild, very organic pattern. It has a lot of loops and flares and kind of little bits and pieces here and there where you can go off in a million directions, and you don't really have to know where you're going when you start, which is kind of a great metaphor for the way life kind of comes at you sometimes. So I think that's one of the reasons that I like it a lot. Good morning, Sue. How are you today? But I play with this a lot. One of the areas that I struggle with Rixty is figuring out how to end it. Not always, but in a lot of cases it looks unfinished to me if I just end it with the Rixty kind of done with its little hat, right? So with that in mind, I tend to like to incorporate it so that it loops together and that it finishes off in little curly cues or in little mukas. So I think that adds a little bit of flair to it, and it's just it's the way I draw it most of the time. I have another way that I like to draw them. I think of them like little, it's another way I draw them, and I tend to be more apt to leave them open, I guess I would say, where the top isn't fit or doesn't really go anywhere else. And I always refer to this as my alien eyes way of drawing them. So Rixty starts out with my basic, my stroke, but I always kind of widen it at the top, and instead of drawing straight across, I come off into the loops in one stroke. So I have that way. I'm going to set that off to the side because I am actually going to ask those of you that are watching this morning to kind of give me a couple ideas of which ones you'd like to see me draw. I have more of these in my head that I have not even done little examples of. So I have, this is kind of, if you visit Rick and Maria's tangle pattern sheet, their step out for this, they draw it in spokes. It's definitely demoed in spokes, which I like. And I actually do a few different things with the spokes, but one of my favorite ways is to actually turn them into little flowers. I know that I tend to use this as a very organic pattern anyway, but I think that they look really, really cute as little flowers. So I just do some spokes of them, and I do a more rounded version. Instead of everything being really straight and crisp, it's kind of more rounded, and then I do an aura around the outside, and I add some little stems that kind of mimic the little spokes, and that's how I finish that one. I'm going to set that off to the side, and then this is the sort of fat one. This one, the alien eyes, yeah, this one's fun, and it's really easy to draw. Good morning, Roseanne. So with the spokes, I like to draw them another way as well, and I couldn't find my example. I think it's actually up on the wall in my studio, but I usually draw this in silvers and blues, which doesn't show up quite as well under the camera anyway. So these two are drawn very, very similar with the spoke pattern, but I turn one into a snowflake by leaving it very, very crisp and sharp edges. And then remember I said I struggle with how you end Rixty, right? That I don't like it to just kind of have its little hat sitting there. So I bring it up and I connect them and make them into cute little points, right? So basic idea, just changing up the shape a little bit. So I'll set those off to the side. Two things that I always like to show examples of when I show a pattern, and that is using it as a border. I don't think you can really go wrong with using this as a border. This is the perfect border for any kind of organic tangling that you might want to do, or something that looks a little whimsical or fun. You can just kind of go in all different directions. That's one of my favorite parts of this, is how flowy and how easy it is to change direction when you're going and tangling with this. Hi Tricia, good morning. So I probably won't demo it this way unless I just demo it as the way to draw Rixty. I did want to point out, I usually like to show a couple different little things in a pattern, or in an example, because that gives me more room to kind of incorporate more in. So instead of coloring them in the backgrounds in black or leaving them empty, I put little stripes in them. So while I have this one here, something else I wanted to show you is how much it changes things if instead of leaving these white, you actually color in your little auras, right? So if you actually change this up so that these are a darker pattern, you get a much different look than when they're white. And you can even mix that up, right, so that you have some that are white and some that are black. It's a fun way to bring in just a little pop of color as well, either in these aura rings or even in your in this little area that normally we would shade. So just a little bit to see there how you can kind of change that up a little bit, right? And then the other way that I like to show you to use it is as a string. Rixty, once again, because it can go in all different directions, is really a great one to use as a string. You can draw it larger. You can, in this case, I made them closer together, whereas if I had drawn them further apart, I would also have a different look, right? So there's so many different avenues to go in, just in changing up the spacing and the way they, this one once again is much crisper than the ones that I did here, which are more rounded and kind of I don't know, kind of squishy. Alright, so some fun things to show. Changing up the shape of your little Rixty will also give you a fun alternative, a fun variable or variation. So I did this one around Valentine's Day. I think I actually did this for Zentangle, and I made it exactly the same as I normally would my Rixty, and then I just kind of rounded this area to make it into a little heart, and then when I made my aura I used it as a heart. So I'm going to set these off to the side, and I'm going to, oh, actually here's another one that I did for Zentangle where I made it smaller. So those are the ones that I wanted to show you. I'm going to demo how to draw your basic Rixty for those of you that may not draw Rixty. Plus, I always think it's nice to see how different people draw different patterns, because we all tend to do them just a little bit different. We put our own little spin on it. So I'm going to come in with my mechanical pencil, and this is one of those patterns that I'm really glad I switched to the mechanical pencil for, because it lets me really get in there with some little teeny tiny details. So I'm not going to draw this as small as I tend to. When I said that this is my standard way of drawing it, this is very, very much the way that I draw it on a regular basis. And I'm going to kind of draw it like this. I'm just going to go a little bigger than usual to kind of fill up my space and not have it take all day, because Rixty is one of those that I tend to get lost in, and I just keep drawing and drawing and drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a line, and I could make this curvy or I could make it straight depending on how I want to go. Because I tend to treat this as an organic tangle, my go-to is obviously to go with a more curved line. And then I make an aura of that line. Okay? I'm going to come in and I'm going to add kind of like a little line that bisects that line. I think of it as putting a little hat on top of my little line. Okay? I bring down the corners from each side, and you can make those meet. They don't cross over the stem, but you can bring them down so they're the exact same distance, or you can kind of vary it like I did here. And now you add an aura. I like to, when I draw it this way, I like to leave my aura approximately the same size as my stem, but varying that size or that shape is really going to give you a different look depending on how you draw it. Okay? So I want to kind of go off in this way and this direction. So I'm going to actually split this. So this stem's going to kind of come off this way, and this stem's going to kind of come off this way. I want them to be about the same thickness. So I'm auraing each of these, and I bring this one in to come to a little point. I make a little hat there and a little hat there. Again, I bring my lines down so that I have like a little triangle shape that I can aura. My daughter says this is kind of like an inner tube going around the outside, which is kind of a fun way to think about it. Okay. Now I can bring this up here, and this one can branch off this way. I'm not going to fill this whole tile with this pattern. I'll do a bit, and I'll show you a couple little ways to like finish some of them off and overlap, but I'm not going to do the whole tile because I want time for variations. Okay, so I'm splitting this off, bringing it down, and while I do this, I want you to think about which ones that I showed you that you would like to see me demo. I can demo probably 2 of these because I have a third one that I want to show you as well. Alright, so this one is going to kind of just go off the edge here. and then come up like this. So I have one spoke going this way, and I have one little tendril coming off this way. So that's one way of finishing it off, is just to kind of have it go off the page, and then you don't have to think about it again. This one over here is getting close to the edge, so I could, if I wanted to, just continue this one off the page as well. And maybe I will in that direction. But in this direction, I want something different. So I'm going to finish that edge, right? And then with this one, I'm going to make a little curly Q and kind of bring it into a little ball, and then I curve back and connect with that line. Okay? This one I'm going to bring up in this direction, and then I'm going to bring this one in this direction. So we're going to finish this one too. I'm going to bring this one up into kind of a curled, into very similar to that shape, right? I'm going to bring that down, and then I'm going to bring this one over and curl it in so that it's very Muka-esque. And that's another way to finish. Oh, that's another way to finish off an edge. Okay. So, as you can see, this can fill up your page pretty quickly, or you can get very, very intricate with it and have them going in a million different directions and have it take as long as you would like. In varying all of these features up, you could put a pattern in these little stem or these little tendrils. They look amazing with striping. Or Beetlejuice. You could use color. You could leave these little spaces empty, or you could color them in. I'm leaving them empty on this one only for time's sake. Most of the time when I draw this like this, I do actually color these in. But again, I would stay all morning and play, but I don't know what everybody has planned for their Saturdays. So you can see how you can really get lost in this, and you can really kind of just go everywhere, every which direction. It's a great way to create, a garden or some kind of undersea organic pattern. Okay. Again, I'm going to finish this one off in a little curl. We'll bring that in, and there you go. All right, so that's your basic, your traditional Rixty. Oh, I have this one empty here. I didn't finish this one off. So let's do this one again. I'm going to do this one kind of like a Muka. And I could have left that as a single one, but I didn't want to. And you can make them meet as well. You can see right here, I actually had this one loop into that one, which is kind of a fun way to play with them. Good morning, Lisa. All right, so those are some of so that's our basic Rixty pattern. Of the ones that I showed you when we first started, would you like to see any of those again? I'm going to or would you like me to demo any of these for you so that you can see how I drew them? Or would you like me to show you some more variations? Alright, I'm just going to kind of put them down and then move them off. So the flower one, absolutely. I'll definitely do the flower one. Anything else? All right. So we'll start with the flower one, and if you think of any of these that you'd like me to show you, I'll be happy to do those as well. So the flowers, I tend to freehand them, but if it's easier for you, you can start with a little pencil shape. I'm going to do it on this one that I have the border on. So you can make kind of a little, like a little star shape with your pencil, and it can have as many spokes as you want it to, or you can just draw it freehand. I tend to draw it freehand, but it's kind of nice sometimes to have a little bit of an outline there to work with. So I'm going to do it freehand as well. So I draw these two little spokes, I turn my tile, I draw two more little spokes, and I just kind of go until I have somewhere between usually 5 and 8 of these going around. It doesn't really matter how many. Flowers have all different numbers of petals. Okay, so because I have a rounded edge on this, it's perfect for this because I like these to be a little more round. So instead of drawing a straight across line, a straight across little hat, you can make a curve. Okay, so I do that on each one, and I turn my tile as I go. Once I have that step done, if I'm going to make multiple, I like to go, hold on just a second, let me refocus. I think that's better. Alright, so I like to go and I like to do these other ones just in case I want anything to overlap. That way I know where I'm going to draw all of them, and I don't have to kind of overthink it. So as you can see, where I drew the pencil lines, I'm just kind of using those as guidelines. I'm really not overthinking it. And I will come in with my pen and everything, so you're not really going to see those pencil lines anyway. I draw them darker under the camera than I normally do with in my regular tangling. If you wanted to, you could certainly come in with an eraser, but they're really not going to show. So this one has a few more spokes because of the way that I drew it, and that's okay. I like having them varied, so alright. So again, I'm going to make those little hats. And I don't know why I think of them like little hats, but I do. Okay. Oh, sorry, off the screen. So I'm still going to bring these down. So now instead of it being, you know, a triangle, it's a little bit more of a wedge. And that's okay. You could, you know, you could stretch these out really long if you wanted to and get a completely different petal shape. And I will actually do that on this one right here. So bring them down really long and come in, because it's just going to give you a different look. And that's what these little Facebook Lives are all about, is giving you a bunch of ideas that hopefully you will then turn around, take, and let spark your own information and kind of, you know, run with it. So that you have, you know, you can take it, your own ideas and really just kind of play with it until you have, you know, a whole bunch of different ideas. All right, so that's that. I'm going to do this one kind of like almost in between, where it's a little longer than this one but shorter than this one. And again, you can color in, you can use patterns, whatever it is that, you know, kind of captures your attention. So once I have this done, I come in, I make my little aura around each spoke. And you'll find your own rhythm for how you do this. Maybe you do all of one at once and then move on to the other. I just like to do them this way when I have multiple, so that I know what everything kind of looks like, so that I know how much space I want to leave as I go. So these, because there's so many, I kind of have to be tiny with this, but it gives you a really neat effect. And you could decide what you wanted to color in. These are fun to color in these little spaces with different colors when if you're making them like flowers. And again, this is a really organic-y kind of pattern. You can do so many fun things with it. It just flows nicely. You could, you know, continue this and make another one here to kind of make a different type of petal if you wanted to as well. But I usually, when I make them as flowers, I usually leave them like this. And then I like to come in and I make an aura all the way around. And then I make an aura around the next one. And I kind of, you know, just dip into those little spaces between. It adds kind of like a pop look to it. Okay, and then for my stems, I usually just pick a spot and I pull down a line, and then I come in almost like a little Y shape. And pull it down towards the bottom. But you can make your stems however you like. That's just the way I make them. And there you go. There's your little flower shape. All right. So that's the flower shape. I see I have a couple other requests for different variations. Let's see. Someone said the left tile variations, and I'm not quite sure which one that was because I didn't see when it got posted, so I'm gonna quickly lay these out. Someone said the Celtic Knot one. That is, I'm not gonna demo the Celtic Knot because that's a different pattern and a different way to go. I showed this because I had Rixty done in a heart in the background. So if that's what you want to see, let me know. I can show you that. And then there it is as a string. So which one were we looking for? My air conditioner just kicked on. If it gets really loud, somebody please give me a shout. All right, I know Sue, you had said that you liked this one, so I'm going to show you how I draw that. And then I have another one that I want to... I moved stuff and I'm not sure which one. Terry, which one? The snowflake? This one? Or this one? I'm going to get rid of all these other ones because I'm still not sure which one you want. Okay, Snowflake or the one that looks like a little aliens? This one. Alright, this one's really fun to draw. This one is a little bit of a little bit variable, so I'm glad you wanted to see this one, because this one gets drawn just a little bit different. Okay, so it starts out the same way. I come up with a line, but when I make this second aura, as I come to the top, I kind of branch it out a little bit. Okay, so there's a little bit of like a Y, and then instead of making the hat on the top, I curve it over and I come back on myself. Okay, so on both sides I curve it and I come back. And then I do an aura around the whole thing. Okay, bringing it down. So I come up, I bring it like a loop, I bring this one up, you can see it's branching off like a Y, I make a loop, kind of like bunny ears, and then I aura the whole thing. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? And then I would come in, and this is always fun to, you know, you could do some kind of pattern in here or just color it in, but patterns are always fun, right? And these almost look like a different kind of flower or something. I kind of see little hearts in there too, depending on how rounded I make them. These don't give you the opportunity to continue on like, you know, these ones do, but it's completely different way of going. One thing you can do with these is you can actually add little embellishments on the top, right? So you could actually, you know, make little stacks of orbs or something like that. Again, that one's curvier than I normally do them, but it's still gonna look really cool, right? Finish that off with a couple little bubbles on the top. Isn't that fun? It's just such a fun way to do it. You know, you can always like add little antennas to it too. I don't know. These always look like they come from some other world, so they're like little alien flowers or something in my head. I use Rixty a lot. It was really funny because I kind of went through and I was going through some of my tiles to see which ones I should show you, and I'm like, why can't I find any of my tiles that have Rixty on them? And I think it's because a lot of them I tend to give away, because they often are some of my favorite tiles. Let's see, so something else I wanted to show you, and it's a good one to do on here, even with a basic Rixty. Okay, so maybe I have a little skinny one coming up in here that's a traditional Rixty, because they're fun to incorporate. And remember, I talked about how I have a hard time trying to figure out how to end them. That's my biggest drawback in drawing Rixty, which is why I've come up with a bunch of variations. Okay, so I've added these in here. You can add another pattern on top of your Rixty. So maybe you want to make a little orb, and you want to turn that into a henna drum. So now this basically just became the base of a flower. Or let's see, maybe you want to just add some little bubbles onto the top, you know, some like almost like little flux. Or even just rounded like an orb on top. But if you do that, I find that they kind of look like ice cream cones. Of course, it's summer, so I am obsessed with ice cream cones right now. So those are some of the fun things that you can do with this. Let's see. Trying to think what other fun things I can show you. I'll do one more. And then my pattern sheet today is going to have a ton of these, and I'm going to be like, oops, I can't fit everything on there. So with this one, I'm just going to show you a couple little variations just for fun. You can make a very, very wide, very, very fat stem. With a very, very narrow top. This is good around the holidays. I like to use this to draw something that looks like Santa's belt. Or to attach like little jingle bells to it. I don't know why I'm thinking all these cold stuff. Snowflake, Santa's belt. It does not feel very July-ish. Yes, popsicles. Definitely popsicles. For those that don't know, I talked about this in some of my classes this week. You have to check out the Outshine popsicles because they have taken popsicles to the next level and they are dipping them in dark chocolate. And never before have I wanted to eat popsicles for breakfast or lunch or dinner. Doesn't really matter. Popsicles are amazing. They took dark chocolate and dipped strawberry fruit bars, and then they rolled them in almonds and granola, and they are wonderful. And then they did the same thing with coconut. Alright, so you can see that's a very, very different look than that. Right? So my hope is that I'm giving you some ideas and that you're going to kind of run with this in a million different ways in your own particular, you know, tangly fashion. This one is one I started earlier just to kind of show you that you can use different shapes. So I'm going to make my little hat, and I'm going to turn this into an oval instead of a triangle. Making a very curvy little row of these here. I find that one of the keys is making sure that your edges actually touch your little hat. And that's, you know, so I'm going to draw it here, and then I'm actually going to make the effort. You know, those little details are important, and it always looks nicer and crisper if you get it to the edge there. And you can see, I'm not even sure what this is. I don't know. It looks like an upside down little house. So I have that, I have ovals. You could obviously do it with a circle. If you do it with a circle, I tend to draw the circle before I bring my stuff all the way up to the edges, just because otherwise it's not quite as round. right? But you can really do it with any shape available. Let's see. I think that is the main ideas that I wanted to show you today. Again, changing up your color, your shape even slightly, doing things like, you know, doing variations with your light and your dark. Maybe I would want to color these in. Maybe I would want to, you know, leave these or do, I have this stripey pattern in here, so maybe I'd add the stripey pattern in some of these. And then, let's see, right here, if you color in your ribbon, once again, that also gives you a very, very different look. The only thing I want to caution you about if you do this is that coloring in these spaces then gets lost. So I would do a pattern or I would shade them. Right? The last thing I want to show you before we're done for the day is shading, because you shade all of them really the same way. Okay? So I'm going to do shading on this one. I'm going to leave these spaces empty so you can see, you know, how they get shaded if you were to shade those in. So I always like to shade just under that initial little hat line that you made. Right? So I lay down a line of graphite. Take my tortillon, if I remember where I put it. They wander off. I don't even know where they go. Haha, there's the one I was looking for. I have a nice new one. So then I just kind of drag my graphite around. I pull it down into those little spaces. And I fade it over that line, right? So that I have that shadow. Pull it down into these little crevices, and then I soften it. I always tend to use the side of my tortillon, which I think actually wears them out a little faster, but that's okay. A lot of people make little circles, and if that works for you, great. I find I have less control that way. So for me, that doesn't work, but I know for a lot of people it really does. So however that works for you. Okay, so there's that. And really you would shade them the same way. If I was going to shade, let's see, this one that I just did, I don't really have anything that overlaps, but if I did, if these vines overlapped each other kind of like they do here, I might also go in and just add a little bit of shading anywhere there's a bit of an overlap. And you can shade on the other side of these as well, and it will give you just a very, very subtle difference. One thing I do want to point out is when you have this much dark, when you're using, you know, a lot of heavy black of any kind, and this applies to any pattern, it shades differently. Your tortillon kind of rubs a little differently on the ink because you've added a lot of ink to a high cotton paper, and it just changes things up a little bit. So you just kind of want to be a little cognizant of that and just aware of it. These you would shade pretty much the same way, only because there's no little hat, I tend to shade in this little curve. So right here. I just figured I should show you this because I said that we shade them all the same way, but this one doesn't have a little hat.